But you haven't weighed in on that. What do you think of that? Are you listening or are you reading?
Sorry, I was reading.
You were figuring out how to record?
Yeah.
Do what?
You were figuring out how to record?
No.
Oh.
I was reading, trying to find something out of Deep Survival that we could use as a step-off point.
Well, we
looking
had
at
a pretty good psychological
Yeah. I mean,
conversation.
we were, but he was. I wanted him in on the conversation.
We'll have to stop, not stop. He'll have to just get him up to speed on.
Yeah,
say it again.
I don't want to go too far down the road, and we.
No, I think it's a good one to just start unpacking.
Say it again.
I mean, yeah, okay. The question?
Yeah.
Is it ever okay to violate a psychological contract? Why or why not? And we define a psychological contract as an unwritten agreement that sets out what a manager expects from an employee and vice versa.
So you've got a contract between an employee and a supervisor, and you're asking if it's ever okay to break that contract.
Yeah. This is a question from a college course I was taking, and I liked it because I saw it as a very rabbit hole. It's a lot more complex of a question than it appears when you first read it. Because everybody would say, "No, violating a contract is wrong." I mean, initially, that's kind of how you would look at it.
I'd say
that's
absolutely
exactly how you went with it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, it's okay to break the contract. However, you have to let the people that you're breaking the contract with know you're going to break the contract.
Well, that's
and why.
So you bring up a good point. So I want to read this little piece right here. Talking about where psychological contract came from, like the birth. I'm not going to get into who developed it in the organization, but the psychological contract includes informal arrangements, mutual beliefs, common ground, and perceptions between the two parties.
Right.
So now go with what you were going to say as far as it being okay to.
Well, I mean, a contract's only. I mean, are we talking about a contract that you're going to have for the rest of your life? You know what I mean? It's going to be a contract.
I hope not to be employed for the rest of my life.
I was going to say, at least solid.
Why would you create something that's going to exist forever and ever as a static, doesn't change, this is it?
Well, it's created, but it's not like, again, it's not codified. It's not. No, but it's just there.
When it changes, and it's going to change because it's based on people and it's based on situations and relationships and perspectives and all those things, when it changes, doesn't it have to adapt and change the contract as well?
Yeah, because you're making me think, because each one of us have a psychological contract.
You and I were friends at some point. We became
throwing me off a little bit, buddy. Something happened and I don't know about.
We had broken our contract. You and I were friends, but then at some point we became closer friends. That contract changed.
Yeah,
we became best friends.
Still existed.
It did, but it changed.
Yeah,
it changed.
And didn't start a new one.
As long as you and I both knew it changed. But this gets back into, so I'd apply this to where we had an episode quite a while ago about mentors and mentees, and people choose you maybe as the person that they want to be their mentor, but if they don't let that person know, so in this instance, somebody could establish a relationship with somebody that they think is much more of a one-on-one, you're my guide, right, but the other person doesn't know it
that way. Right.
So I think it's okay to break contracts or to amend them, but both parties have to be aware of what's changing and why it's changing. So
in the world of emergencies,
right,
not just us, maybe EMS and fire or police as well, do we have time to make people aware of the change? Let's take the employee
on a scene.
Yeah, let's take employer versus employee.
So not always.
Right.
The situation might be exigent to the point that there's no time to explain this has got to happen, but that's where trust takes over. If I come to you and I tell you, look, I need you to run into that building, but I need you to take your turnout gear off. That's a crazy, whatever. But if you trust me to that point, you know what I mean? I can't take time to tell you why, but I need you to do this. And if you trust me, you might do it. And I'm not going to do it. I'm not abusing that trust. There really is some reason that this has got to get done. I can't tell you right now. I will tell you when we're done.
Right.
But I think that's where trust takes over. I think that's where those relationships exist.
I see. That was like a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. And
you're right. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, like I said, that question when I first got posed, I was like, this seems like such a simple question. This is not a simple question at all.
No, it's nothing but gray in my
Yeah,
head.
exactly. It's very much a gray question.
But I think it's as long as it's gray on both sides. If one side thinks it's black and white and the other side sees nothing but gray, then you've got a problem.
Do you think more organizations would see it as black and white because they write policy trying to make things, especially in emergency services, as like defined of?
If the organization is writing policies trying to pigeonhole things and say this is what's going to happen when this happens, that's wrong, in my opinion. Because you're never going to anticipate every eventuality, and to write a policy that way is ridiculous.
Yeah, you won't catch it.
The more general your policy is, the better it is, and the longer it's going to last, and the better the folks that are having to use it are going to behave inside that system.
So that also goes into the whole concept of that. For that, you need people to have good judgment, to be able to read the situation.
Absolutely.
But then they need, the departments or organizations need to work on developing that good judgment within their employees, which I think that's a lot of times overlooked.
Sure.
Because they look at it as tenure or don't have time or don't know, how to develop good judgment in people.
Right. And Colin Powell said, and I'm going to screw this up, but Colin Powell said that experience comes from bad judgment.
Yeah.
And then
where else would it come from, right?
And then good judgment comes from experience. So you can't gain experience without having bad judgment. You've got to allow people to make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes. The problem is that in our profession, it's a ramped up.
Yeah, the stakes are so high to make mistakes.
Sometimes. Right. We like to think that it's like critical all the time, and it's not. Some situations are more critical than others.
Well, and that's what I thought was so unique about a former department, where you could have very, very senior people riding in the back, watching what's happening, and lesser experienced people riding up front, and we're not going to let them fail. We still let them, they do all the talking, they make the decisions and whatever, but they have that safety net of very experienced people in the back saying, yeah, you're good. It's going to be okay.
I think that's more to that, what we were talking about with that laissez-faire approach. And which I think is actually the ideal for battalion chief or for anybody above that, is that you are those guardrails. I'm not going to keep you from weaving in the lane, but when you get far enough over, I'm going to go, nope, let's nudge you back to the center. I think that's the role of the battalion chief, but that's just me.
That is just you.
Or if you wanted, instead of guardrails, like the old-timey cars at Six Flags that have a little rail that runs down the middle. Yeah. You can only get so far off the path, and then you're going to get jerked back to the other way.
Yeah, you had a good way of looking at the laissez-faire. It's not the way I was originally visualizing it myself.
Me neither, even though, and we're changing topics here midstream.
I didn't realize we had one.
Well, we were just going, but we're definitely changing topics.
Did you not see the card that I had on Trello that I just read to you?
No, I have not looked at it. No, but you'd fall into the same trap of, if you take laissez-faire to the extreme, where it's total hands off, that's wrong. If you take authoritarian or autocratic leadership to the nth degree, where the leader has to be the one that tells everybody what to do, and nobody is allowed to do anything other than what the leader did, that's going to fail.
Well, I think
Democratic will fail if you take it to the extremes, where everybody gets a vote on everything. Like
we were saying earlier, I think it's all situational. Emergency teams are much more autocratic. There's one guy in charge making the calls of which way things go.
Yeah.
A committee would be more democratic. Hey, everybody have a vote in what's going on here.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, laissez-faire, if you have people that are high functioning and doing well, maybe just getting out of their way and letting them get things done.
Right. The component that affects a democracy and whether a democracy works, and this is not a political statement, this is a on-scene leadership kind of thing, is time. Time compresses everything, and if as the time gets shorter, democracy gets less and less effective.
Yeah,
but it's all based on trust. If I'm no longer giving you the ability to weigh in on what you think we should do, you have to trust me that I'm going to do what's right. Hopefully,
that's an interesting concept if you think about the emergency scene and what emergency scene, because there are some emergency scenes that have allow us to have a little more time.
Oh, yeah.
Our technical rescues,
Hazmat.
our hazmat.
What do you think we should do?
You end up inversely having more democratic type
Absolutely.
an approach to that. But
What do you
as
think we
time
should do?
goes-
What do you think we should do?
Literally, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
that. But as the emergency changes down that spectrum and you get to a more time sensitive one, now you're getting more into that autocratic.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. All right, well, let's quit recording then. Let's leave it on a high.
Well, no, let's go back to your contract. I mean,
Gear 3.
Yeah. We put it back in second. All right, go back to my contract.
I don't have a problem breaking that.
I want to know what the context is. Like, I'm having a little bit of a hang up. Are we talking about an employee manager, employee business, employee to corporation? Are we talking about coworker? I mean, there's so many pieces. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming since it's probably more employee business.
No, I took it.
Or a manager.
It says manager in the definition because this was from a leadership course. So leadership is
So this is the contract
organization.
between the employee and the manager. Mm-hmm. And is it ever okay to violate the contract, psychological contract? I keep going back to no, but I think there has to be some communication as to when it is going to change.
All right, so as opposed to violating the contract, you want to end a contract and write a new one.
I don't say you're ever ending. I think we are in a psychological contract. I think you're always amending the contract.
So basically, I think what there's not.
I don't think it's a complete draw a line and saying that a contract's over. Now we're starting new.
Then contract is not the right word.
But that's this question.
Okay. It puts you in a moral dilemma.
That's what this basically is about.
It is exactly what it's
Right.
basically. So what do you do in a moral dilemma? Do you go with what your morals say, or do you go with what the manager says?
I think you have to stick with what you're willing to die upon, and if your morals are that, then
what
you
can you
have to
live
be
with?
living with exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So
kinda how I
same
answered it.
thing with the manager though, because they've got their own set of
Right.
morals and ethics that they're going to be willing to say whatever that end is for that, for the employee or vice versa. So I think, and I'm sitting here changing my mind now. I still think it requires some communication, though. There's no way around
required.
it.
Absolutely required.
I don't know how you undo that part without some real communication that it's happening.
I just see me going to somebody and saying, I know I told you we were going to do this. We can't do it now. And here's why.
Well, here's one of the examples they give on the psychological contract that gets sometimes misconstrued with an employee versus the manager. And that is the employee is having this conversation and communication with their manager, and they are starting to pick up, what do I got to do to get promoted, right? And the employee starts to see and starts to create this narrative in the head, well, the manager told me if I did this and if I did that and I did this. And now all of a sudden that employee's done all these things and they didn't get promoted. That employee thinks the psychological contract has been violated.
Yeah.
The manager does not think that. The manager thinks I'm mentoring this individual along as to what you should do. But if there wasn't clear communication from the manager to manage the expectations and say, I'm not saying you're going to get promoted if you do these things. I'm saying I think this is what's required for you to get promoted.
It's oddly that this is so connected to a recent butt dial.
Yeah. Just like that. This episode.
No,
didn't
but
get
I
used.
mean, that's the
Well, that's all we say. That's all I'm going to say.
that's the bridge between saying that this list of 10 things is what if you do these, you're going to get promoted is a completely different statement than you can't get promoted without doing these 10 things. Those are two different statements. One of them is here's the base that you've got to have to
as well defined in
exactly
whatever, the contract.
And you're going to have these things. Now, what makes you get promoted is going to be the extra, whatever that is, whether it's you get along with people,
Right.
Whether I don't know, but it's
It's the extra.
exactly
Not the base.
And our career ladder in the department I work in, up to a point, it is a very, very, very defined. you need these classes, and when you get these classes, you're going to get promoted at certain ranks.
Right. On the criteria based.
Exactly.
Processes.
And then it starts to
Right.
kind of metamorphosize into, you now need these classes and you got to pass a test. So now you've got this list of things and you've got to perform well on a test. Then you get above that and we take the test out of it, really.
Right.
And you've got to do these things, and then somebody's got to choose you for whatever reason they're going to choose.
Whatever the needs may be at the time of promotion.
Entirely. We're back to the chess piece on the board. You might not be the most powerful piece on the board, but you might be in the right spot at that moment.
That is a tough spot to understand and to recognize and accept, even as an individual.
Sure.
I can understand it when I'm looking at someone else and saying, sorry you didn't get promoted. But when you are the person, then it's another difficult situation.
But that's, again, it goes back to that psychological contract. When you've done all the things that you think are meeting that criteria, it's an unwritten thing of what it is that takes you to go to that next level. And so they feel like it's been violated on them.
Although it may not have been. I would say that I would agree with that person that they say, I feel like you told me, and this has actually happened.
You're pointing at me.
Yeah. This has happened. We've seen it over our career where we know individuals were told, you're next. You are getting it.
No, I was told
and
twice.
And then the next thing you know, you weren't picked.
No. I was.
That is a violated psychological contract.
Yeah. The chief of ops took me behind a station one day and said, "You're getting promoted to battalion chief tomorrow," and I lightheartedly said, "Well, when I see the blue order come out, And he did not like that at all. He got really, really upset.
You.
Yeah, but the next day, my name wasn't on the blue order, and it wasn't his fault. He thought I was going to get promoted, but yeah, it happens.
So you being you handled that well. But my point, let's just take you out of it and someone else in that same situation. That is clearly a breach of a psychological contract.
I didn't think of it that way.
No, you didn't. I'm taking you out. Sorry. You're not on the player. You're not on the board anymore. You don't
because
count.
I trusted the guy that told me, and I knew that he didn't tell me that to mess with me. He told me that because he believed it and he thought that was what was going to happen.
So
it was a psychological contract with the department, maybe though, that you felt violated.
I didn't know. I mean, under that administration, I didn't have a relationship with the top in that
decision maker, decision maker
in that iteration of our department, because other people had been done like that before, and I was skeptical that I was going to be any different. So I didn't have that relationship. There was no breaking of a contract there.
And guess what?
You didn't have that trust.
Well, no. It may have been, but I think what's important there is we may have been accustomed to in that time and the culture of that department at the time where we were used to those contracts being broke.
Right.
Yeah. So you don't even
question it. You almost expect it
in the contract as what.
Yeah, but I'd say you didn't have a contract. If you're used to contracts being broken, you don't have a contract.
That doesn't mean it wasn't there just because it got broke.
I don't think there was a contract. I think
you put too much fours on that one.
Yeah, okay. I do too.
There's still something there. Just because it got broke doesn't mean it didn't exist.
I don't say that there's not something there, but a contract would imply that
we're talking about psychological contracts.
You both understand.
Allegedly.
Yeah, that's the whole thing too. There's a lot of misunderstanding within that when they feel like it's violated.
It's the whole point. It's such a tricky little situation. It's got to be. It's almost like how do you well define it? How do you well define it, and at the same time make it an unwritten?
Right.
I don't know how you do that.
Right.
Because how you perceive something, how you take something, how I say something, it's way too much ambiguity that can be woven in that.
Right. I agree.
That is a dangerous little.
I don't like the word contract.
I think that's probably why it's so tricky, and how this is how employees have start to get this. What's the word I'm looking for? This separation from their business or their company. There's no connection there because they can't.
Right. They start having that negative morale, like all these contracts have been broken with me.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. And then it starts going in this rabbit hole, which we could morph into the whole pay and retention kind of thing.
No, we've done that.
We fixed all that. Remember?
Yeah.
Oh.
You might have missed that episode.
You fixed the paper.
Oh my God. We exploded the internet. That's what we did.
Wow, Pat, you got my mind really turning on this psychological contract piece because it is there whether you like it or not. I don't even know you have to define it. It just establishes itself.
Right. And that's why, like I said, when the very first thing I wrote was, this is a rabbit hole for me. Because I was like, there's so many pathways that this goes down. I was like, I could write
So
probably
wait,
a
you
whole
were doing
paper.
this for school?
Yeah.
And did you end up, did the instructor end up giving you any feedback? Was there a right
No,
or
this was a
wrong
discussion
answer, or-
question amongst students, whatever. And
And the rest of the students are in the fire service or in other services?
both.
Okay, so what were their takes?
I haven't read all of them, but it seemed like most of them understood that if you were asked to do something that was unethical or blah 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 blah, that obviously they would break that contract. But I think they were thinking of it a little bit more, kind of like Shane was looking at it initially. Is like, it's a contract and you don't violate contracts.
Well, I say no.
And so
I
your
don't like
initial
that
thing
word.
is to say no, you wouldn't violate a contract.
But the reality,
is, it's so unwritten and it's so much about agreed upon conditions that you can violate it without even realizing you're violating, because you don't have the same agreement with whoever you're making it
you
with.
may wake up one morning and have a really shitty attitude,
Right.
And you start violating the quote unquote contract with your employer because you're acting like an asshole in the office, and that's not the expectation.
Right.
But
And
yet
so,
you
like,
just broke it.
yeah, the more I thought about it, I was like, man, this is so much deeper than I initially thought it was. I was like, this is going to take way too long to write this out. So I just took it, like I said, I took it from one scenario.
It's an interesting concept. I think I'm kind of liking this.
I don't know. I think I'm missing some nuance.
Yeah, we should put that on a shirt.
B-Spark, missing
No, I mean,
nuance.
I don't know. I guess I'm seeing this more. I don't know.
I think the more I've been sitting here hacking through it and talking about it, the psychological contract to me is really just much more of a understanding, a perceived understanding, probably more importantly, of how I interact with my employer or how I interact with my subordinates, because there's all kinds of psychological contracts. They're all over the place. Me with my boss, me with the organization, me with the city, me with you. They're all over. But I think the guideline has to be, what are your values? Like, you need to understand what your personal values are. Like, what can you stand behind and what can you not?
And that's what it gets back to, the moral dilemma. It basically, when whatever you're doing in your, for employment, whatever you're doing in employment, when it puts you in a moral dilemma, that you're having to choose between what you can live with and what you can't live with, And there are people all the time that choose what they consider to be the easy answer. Oh, I'm not going to stand my ground here because that's going to make me look bad in front of my, my boss or whatever, because I don't think this is right, and blah, blah, blah. But in the long run, do they feel worse about it? Like when they retire and they looked at this as the person that never had a backbone, or you didn't stand up for this person or whatever. Are they proud of that moment? You know what I mean? So
That depends on what they're chasing.
Right. But again, that's a part of that.
God, and what an opportunity for growth that comes out of that too, because that individual may at one point that happened and go, man, I should have stood behind that person more. I won't let that happen again next time.
Right.
Whatever,
Hopefully they did that self-assessment to say that, in a situation. And I think as you go up in an organization, you get more and more opportunities to be confronted with social contracts or psychological contracts or moral dilemmas. I think maybe at the lower levels, the early entry levels, they probably don't hit them as much and look at them as much as a moral dilemma.
But I would also say that where maybe some of the higher people in the department choose to not stand on whatever they morally think is right, because they, for whatever kind of expediency, want to do away with that.
What's right is subjective.
Well, but I also see on where others will stand on, they want to die on even smaller hills just for the sake of dying on them, or they think other people should be dying on a hill.
Right.
And dying is dying.
That's fact.
If you're willing to die on a hill, be prepared to die.
Literally, I wouldn't literally,
And
but you know what I mean, but
right, but
that's it.
If you're willing to compromise, maybe move a little bit to live to fight another day. Now, what you're fighting for is the other thing. If you're fighting for that good, virtuous thing, that's living to fight another day is a good thing. If you're fighting to try and get another bugle on your collar, you're not doing anybody any good other than yourself. So giving up on principles or anything like that and being
for that purpose.
Yeah, that's the
problematic.
wrong thing.
Yeah.
But
aren't we in a society of more self-indulgent people than ever before?
Absolutely,
I don't think so.
I think so.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
You don't think that this?
I think there are plenty of people who still have the right. They want to do the right thing, and I don't think.
Ultimately, I agree with you on that.
I don't think that there are a lot of people that are chasing fame or that are chasing self-aggrandizement, whatever. I think there are a few of them, and they are out there, and unfortunately, they get a lot of attention.
And that's probably what makes it's the loud few.
Yeah,
And fortunately, we're going to go. I want to make sure. We, for the most part, don't think that's everybody.
No,
Most people
I think
want
most
to do well.
people are trying to do the right
Handle
thing.
business.
Yes, but I think on both ends of the spectrum, you've got people that are willing to do anything to promote themselves, and not promote in a literal promote in rank, but just self-promotion, whatever that looks like. Basically saying I'm better than other people.
Those are the arrogant people and narcissists.
Well, I think narcissism can be a piece of that, but it's not necessarily.
That's my one thing I still want to do research on.
But then on the other end of the spectrum,
by that.
On the other end of the spectrum, you've got people that think every hill is a hill to die on.
Yeah.
And it can't be, because
Unfortunately, and that's where it's tough, because I know we've had this conversation before, because if every hill is an ethical hill, then yeah, they think they should die on every one of them.
Right.
If it's a moral, every one of them. And if you get right down to it, all of them kind of are. It's just whether or not you're willing to, is that really going to be worth it on this one?
Right. Hatch doesn't know where this is going.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going down another rabbit hole here.
That's what we do. Until we find something we like.
Yeah. I was just thinking maybe for me, I don't see as many people, like I know some, but I don't know a lot that want to die on every hill. I know way more, or I feel like I've experienced way more that were self-promoting. Like they were so worried about
I don't agree.
not rocking the boat
I
to
think-
be able to go further up.
I think there are so many that I hear, and this is what happens every time somebody ends up going up to headquarters. What do they say about them?
They're disconnected. I don't know.
Oh, you drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
You're not willing to fight anymore. You're not going to die on a hill, So and I think that's prevailed. That happens way more than the people that are trying to promote themselves for the sake of promoting themselves.
But what are you saying that is?
I think it's immaturity.
I mean, here we go. But those aren't necessarily people that are trying to die on a hill. They're just telling you their perception of what you are, or the white shirts are, or whatever. They're not saying I'm dying on this hill, blah, blah, blah.
I think they think it's that easy. It's easier to look up and go, I don't know why this person isn't dying on this hill for this issue.
Yeah, but the way you said it is every hill's or something for them to die on. Now, you may have more hills because you're now a white shirt. They may have just one hill that they want you to die on. It may be their truck or their station or their AC or whatever. But because you're over so much more, your scope of influence is so much larger, you see it as multiple hills. They're asking you, is what you're saying. I think it was what you're saying. They're asking you because you have to spread it out. You only have so many bullets. They only have one bullet. They just have the one issue they want you to fight for, not every issue.
Yeah, I don't think that's the person we're talking about, though. In that person that's that wants to die on every hill. It's about the toilet paper. It's about the coffee. It's about what time the chief doesn't talk to us. It's about the trucks.
And you know a lot of those.
I would say a lot, but there's I would say a lot.
The problem with it is
that
that it's contagious. That kind of talk is contagious.
I guess it can be. I just don't know that many of them. Usually the people I know that are trying to die on hills, I mean, I know one or two, but usually, whatever their perspective is, a pretty common perspective. People know that, like, this is an issue. We shouldn't have to be suffering through this. Or at least that's been my experience.
I agree. There are plenty of hills worth dying on.
I feel like we said that a lot. The hill to die on. Like
We
said
probably
it
do.
ad nauseum. But back to the social contract. I mean, that's basically what they're asking for is like, we show up, we risk our lives, we put a turnout gear on, and we need you to worry about our pay. Or
You just said something that made me think. Is there a psychological contract between the fire service and the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if they thought someone should have put my fire out or saved my cat or saved my dog or whatever. Wow, I didn't even think about that angle of the.
Yeah, that wasn't the direction I was going.
Yeah,
But yeah,
no, I was
absolutely.
doing my part.
Yeah.
That's way
I'm doing
more.
my part to misdirect you.
Right.
That's way more disconnected than
Yeah.
I mean, you
How do you manage that contract through social media, through newsletters, through community engagement?
it's the
Yeah, that's how you have to do it.
Everybody's probably had this, but we had a call with a kid that had been dead. He 18 years old. He died, diabetic emergency. Rigor has set in, and his uncle is just in tears, screaming for us to put the AED on him and shock him back to life.
Yeah.
That's a broken
Expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get it. It was an emotional moment for him, and he probably, he wasn't thinking right. But that idea that we can
Fix it.
work miracles,
Right. All of them.
yeah,
Everybody's
and then
savable.
everybody's going to live.
Yeah.
I used to
That's
be
a tough one right there.
me. I'd be watching news footage with somebody and they're doing CPR, and I'm like, "Oh, well, that person's dead." And they're like, "They're dead?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we don't do CPR on live people. We do it when your heart stops. And that makes you dead." Ding. I'm like, "Oh, I guess that makes sense." Well,
We absolutely solved nothing there. Did you?
We solved like
Well,
20
how
nothings.
did you end up responding? What was Mike's response to the psychological contract?
yeah, we do violate it. I don't
We don't
necessarily.
feel good about it, or it's a necessity. How do you violate that contract? The
I
mechanics
basically
of
said
it.
it's about your own set of ethics, morals, and values, and if you have to do what you can live with, because you're going to be, especially in emergency services, you're going to be put in no-win situations. We've talked about this before, that we've had these, and it's not going to be written in policy clearly defined of like, what do you do? You're going to have to make a judgment call, and that judgment call may get you suspended. It may get you disciplined or whatever, but can you live with it? Can you live with the fact that you did what you thought was right to try and save a life or do whatever? And I watch a lot of guys that get caught up in this of like, well, I could get written up. And to me, I'd rather get written up than know that I played a part in somebody passing away, or that I didn't do everything I could to,
right.
to have them pass away. But some people,
It's the
they want to draw that line of
what
like,
you're describing is really extreme ownership. You are owning that decision you made.
yeah, but I mean, I
Period.
think we need to.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. If you're come off script, legitimately come off script,
I don't think there is a script for some of these things.
let's just say if you're going to come off script, my point being, you got to be totally willing to accept all consequences of it, eating your death.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd add that often, and this is the point of the class that you and I have taught before, is that you're not risking your own life if once you're an AOIC. You've got other people's lives
Right.
that you're risking now. The Times Square FDNY rope rescue back in the early 90s, we go over that, and the question that we put to the class is, would you, knowing what you know about the fire, knowing that they didn't have an anchor, a substantial anchor, knowing that the rope shouldn't have even been used, it's not long enough to reach the, there's all these things that point to, don't do this. Would you have gone over the edge? And just about everybody in the class says, yep, I'd go over the edge.
Yep.
But then you have to kind of, you swing it
Change
around
it a
on them,
little
and you
bit.
go, well, now hold on a second. The lieutenant was still on the roof.
Yeah.
He didn't go over the edge. He had his guys going over the edge. So
You're picking somebody now.
exactly, and that's a whole different calculus. So
Yeah, 100%, and that's really it. So that was how I said yes. You do violate it, but you base it off of what you can live with, because you're going to be put in situations that are not going to be scripted, especially in emergency services, and you're going to have to use your moral judgment to make the determination whether or not that was the right thing to do or not, no matter what the consequences are.
Right. Got to be willing to accept them.
I just don't think a lot of people, when they look at like getting promoted or whatever, they look at the money and maybe the authority. And this is not a point that they spend a lot of time thinking about. And it's one of the ones I try to drive home the most of like, you're going to be put in a crazy situation.
Yep.
And the more work you do to prepare yourself and fill yourself with knowledge and experiences, stuff like that, helps you be able to live with, I did everything I could to make the right call. But those ones that, have, gone to slow stations and, done all these things and whatever, and just avoided, the experience, getting experience and asking questions and going to classes, but they took the test and they get promoted. And now they're the shot caller. They're the lieutenant on the roof. Are you prepared to make that call to make somebody else go over the edge?
No, they're not. They'll just be the no.
Right. And I'll just try to get people to understand. I mean, again, I guess going back to that psychological contract, that person going over it is trusting you, that you've weighed all the options, your experience, your time here, and you have been sitting on your hands for 10 years, but you want more money, or you want this power. It's a huge deal.
Wow.
All right. I've done my work today.
I hope what happens is if we work this out, and I hope we do, I hope this makes people think. I hope it makes them stop and go, wow, I didn't take the deep dive into what the weight of what I potentially am doing is.
Yeah. It's probably 2 or 3 years ago, me and my wife and Troach and his wife, we were at dinner one night and we were talking about like on-scene decision making or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I don't always know how to land the plane. She was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I know that putting down the landing gear is supposed to do this. And I was like, in the flaps. I said, but we have situations. We don't always have all the information. I said, I don't know that's going to work. And my wife said, how do you deal with that stress? I'm like, I don't know. I guess I've just had
Does that go back to the conversation we were talking about? Well, I don't know how to land the plane. I've landed it several times this way.
Yeah.
And it's always worked.
Right. Right up until the day it doesn't.
Right to the point it doesn't work.
Right. But then again, did you do everything you could up to that point to prepare yourself to make the best decision you could? And that's really, I think,
do we ever get there? No.
Well,
no, it's a never-ending process. That's what scares me when people are like, I can't learn anymore, or I can't learn something from somebody new. I'm like, are you insane?
Right. No,
that's
I agree.
when you get back to Hal Moore, trust your instincts, but he talks about what it takes
building your gut.
Build those instincts.
Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent point.
It's not just that I've got a gut feeling. It's based off of your training, your reading, your experience.
Right.
And there was a fourth one.
We'll have to get back to that. We should rehash that one again. Did we actually record on that one, or did we talk about recording?
We never recorded on that one.
Yeah, that's a good one, though, because the gut, your intuition, and that's the book that we're reading right now, the Genius book with Lencioni, where he talks about the discernment. That's your gut.
Yeah.
That gut is developed. You don't born with the same gut and you die with the same gut.
You don't born with it?
You are born with a gut. My English is so good. My point being is discernment is not a static working genius. It's ever developing.
Yeah, yeah.
You want it, you need it to be ever developing.
Kind of going back to what Bill said, you have to have more failures to be able to have that discernment, because of that experience. Right.
Right.
And that takes an openness to failure. You have to be open to not being successful.
Which is horrible for me because I have such a fear of failure. I wonder if I get anything done. So,
Hal Moore said the 4 things were education, reading, personality, and experience.
Yeah, personality. We forgot to put that one in there. Of course, that too can develop. You hope your personality can develop. I mean, it's got some core foundations that is just the way you're woven, but you hope that it develops.
Right.
Metamorphosizes.
Yeah, it was a good try.
Let's delete that part.
No, we 100% got to leave that in.
All right. Well,
that was fun.
Yeah.
You don't look enthused.
I didn't realize what a fun conversation.
I'm already thinking about how I'm gonna how I possibly am going to sum this up for the thing that
you're writing the summary already.
No, let Hatch write it.
Combustible is available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Amazon, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to Combustible to make sure you don't miss out on an episode. Follow us on Facebook so we know how many of you listeners there are out there. And you can check us out online at combustiblethepodcast.com. As always, we would like to thank the Golden Dogs and True North Records for letting us use their song Saints at the Gates for our theme music. You can find the Golden Dogs music on any streaming platform. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.